Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the SOMM TV podcast. My name is Jason Wise. On today's episode, I am speaking with one of the great sommeliers in the country of Italy. But guess what? She's an American. She is in our new show, Pairings, episode 2. And I don't know if you've tuned into SOMM TV, but we have a new show, which is our big flagship cooking show that deals with the perfection of food and wine pairing. Well, episode 2 is about to air in 2 days, and if you're listening to this a little later, probably already up. Lindsay Gabbard. She is a sommelier who moved from Santa Barbara, California to Italy and was embraced by both Italians, which is not easy to do, and by a restaurant that's one of the best in the world. She is going to talk to me about what it's like to move to Italy, be a part of this restaurant, and also we're going to talk about the episode that is now airing. Guys, I cannot tell you how proud I am of this show and how thrilled I am that all of you are enjoying it so much on SOMM TV. It means the world to me. Today's episode is sponsored by Collective Napa Valley. Collective Napa Valley celebrates wine lovers who share a common passion for doing good for Napa. As a member, if you join, you'll get exclusive first access to small, intimate events in Napa Valley and online that allow you to meet winemakers, enjoy Napa Valley's world-class hospitality, and taste rare and small production wines, all while helping the community of Napa Valley. There's a small place at our proverbial table for anyone who loves wine and believes in doing good. Find out more at collectivenapavalley.org. Without further ado, my conversation with sommelier and all-around just great person, Lindsay Gabbard. Lindsay, it's really, really, really great to have you on the SOMM TV pod. First of all, I've missed you. We had a very intense month during a week in Rome while I filmed my upcoming film, Cup of Salvation. You have a little cameo in The Whole Animal, which came out on SOMM TV. And then, of course, our big show Pairings, which is our big food show. And you're fantastic in the new Pairings. So we went all the way from our first episode being in America to our second episode in Rome, which is a great reason to talk to you on this pod because you did, Lindsay, what most, I think, Americans think they want to do, which is get the hell out of here and move to Italy and just drink and eat all day, which I'm sure is what you do. So welcome to the SOMM TV podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So I want to start with, obviously you're in Pairings, and obviously we're doing this episode so people know that this new episode dropped. And the restaurant is Rimessa Roscioli, which is, if I did not think this was one of the most you need to visit restaurants in the world, we would not have made it the second episode of our flagship, big food show. So I just want to say that you work there and you know as much about Italian wine as any person that I particularly know. And blasphemously, you are an American. So what I want to do is you were a sommelier in California. How the hell did you end up in Italy and why did you make that choice? I've always dreamed of this.
Well, this is pretty much a novel that I'll try to synthesize in a few minutes for you. Basically what happened was, I grew up in Michigan. I was living in Santa Barbara. I had met Brian McClintock, actually, everyone will know him from SOMM. He had a wine bar in Santa Barbara, and he was the one that encouraged me to start studying more formally with the Court of Master Sommeliers, because I had been reading about wine since I was about 19 years old. And it was just always a big passion of mine. I had no idea why. And eventually I've been working for California Closets. I won a bonus that had to be used for travel. And I started to realize that with studying with the Court of Master Sommeliers, I really started to lose my passion for wine because everything is very, very technical. I found that when I was talking with my friends and my family, my mom was like, Lindsay, can you just drink the wine? And, you think you're going to be learning more information and you're going to have, more information to give people. And this is going to be a good thing. But to some degree, you start talking, like a doctor would speak to a doctor colleague instead of, to a person that's just a patient there that just needs the simple information. And something just was not connecting for me. And I had this money that I had to use for travel, and it had been sitting there for a while. And I finally decided everyone in Santa Barbara would just disappear for 2 months. They weren't even rich people. They just said, I'm going to be here for 2 months. I'm going I'm going to be in Hawaii for a month. And I said, how do these people do it? And so I finally said, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take this money and use it for a trip to Europe by myself, going through the major vineyard regions to really connect back with wine. And so I went for 10 weeks through Spain, France, and Italy by myself, going through as many vineyard regions as I possibly could. And ultimately, I got down to Rome. I met a master sommelier in Trastevere, and he was the one that introduced me to Roscioli. And I was super grateful because I had not eaten that well in Rome. And he took me for a lunch at Salumeria Roscioli, which is our parent restaurant. I found out they did wine tastings the next day. I had one of the best meals of my life there. I found out that they did these wine tastings at the sister restaurant called Rimessa Roscioli, and signed up for that the next day, did the tasting, and pretty much fell in love in every single sense and decided that I wanted to be in Rome.
Rome is, I think there's no more misunderstood place in Italy than Rome. You know, it's, to me, obviously it's a wonderful place. Everybody loves it. But it's also, I think if you see it the wrong way first, you can kind of get thrown the wrong direction for what Rome is.
1,000%. 1,000%.
So why did you settle on Rome? I mean, when I go to Rome, I think there are two types of people. One, you go to Rome. But most people go through Rome. You spend like 2 days there, and then you go to Tuscany, or you go to Florence or Venice or wherever, Naples or something like that. But why did you decide on when you hit that place? Because you're in Spain. I mean, you obviously must have gone some crazy places, and I can't believe really good cacio e pepe made you move to this place forever.
It was not the cacio e pepe. It was a particular person, and yes, his name is Alessandro. Like the typical, obvious, quintessential, love story. Someone moves over for love, finds love, and uproots their life.
A lot of people don't know Diane Lane based your performance in Under the Tuscan Sun on Lindsay. That's where that whole entire story came from.
More or less. I mean, yeah, I'm under the Roman shadows sometimes, but yes. But yeah, no, I fell in love. With the way wine was communicated at Rimessa Roscioli was so different than anywhere I had ever been in my entire life before. For the first time, we weren't talking about the malolactic fermentation and the alcohol percentage and how much time the wine spent in barrels. We were speaking about history, anthropology, philosophy, Robert Parker. We were talking about everything, wines from people from all around the world. So we're speaking about wines from different places. It was the most enriching conversation about wine that I had ever had in my entire life. So that it just moved me. I was finally super interested in what was behind the bottle instead of just seeing wine as such a simple commodity of something that has, X amount of degrees of alcohol, comes from a specific grape and spent X amount of months in a barrel. I mean, because to some degree that's what speaking about wine in California is. It's very, very reduced.
Well, I will say this. So for those of you who have SOMM TV, and I hope you do if you're listening to the pod, we did the craziest thing with Alessandra, who she's talking about, who's also a major character in the episode of Pairings, and Lindsay. We all went to the top of Mount Vesuvius the minute we landed, basically took a train to Naples, and at daybreak the next morning, we hiked up to the top of the mountain that exploded and buried a ton of people under ash at Pompeii. And you guys drank a bottle of a grape that was Catalanesca, correct? The grape?
The grape is Catalanesca, yes.
And you guys drank a bottle of this incredibly rare and storied bottle of wine on the crater of this volcano. And the way the two of these people, Lindsay and Alessandro, talk about wine, it's like you need a cigarette afterwards, like you just had sex. Like the way you two talk about wine is like this deep, it's rhythmic, it's passionate. And I know everybody loves the way, I hate to be the quintessential like American who says the way Italians passionately talk about things, but there's something to that. I mean, the way the two of you talked about this wine, I walked down the mountain on air, and I had like 500 pounds of camera gear, but it was this incredible experience. And then of course we went and filmed the Pairings episode. And so I think with you taking this idea of like, look, I was jaded about wine. I sort of lost my way. I went to Europe. You have to understand that is easy. It's as easy for me as it is for you because I'm around it all the time. And I start to get really bogged down into like, look, yeah, it's fun to talk about acid, and it's fun to talk about, fermentation, and it's fun to talk about, but like, time on the skins and stuff is really not why I got into this. I got into this because people hid wine from the Nazis, and I got into
Absolutely.
This because and so
Wine and War,
when I
the book.
wine, all that stuff, but when I think a lot of what you got when you came and found Rimessa Roscioli is kind of what I got when I found it, in that you get your cup kind of filled back up. And you sort of have this bombardment from every different angle, history. I mean, I think you guys talked about Dionysus more than you talked about wine while I was up there.
That's possible. We're both pretty obsessed with our wine god, yes, Dionysus.
Very, very, very possible. So, but I do want to take it to wine and say there is no question that 99% of people that I speak to, they just look at Italian wine like chaos. They don't have a clue on where do I start? What do I do? How deep is it? What do I drink? How do I find a deal? You could ask a billion questions about Italian wine. So the question I want to ask you as an American who came in there and had a perception of Italian wine, and now I want the audience listening to this to understand how underneath the Italian wine you truly are now. I mean, you may say to me right now, like, I don't know much about Italian wine. I don't know enough. The woman I am speaking to has drank more individual grapes from more regions and seen them and stood with the children and the grandparents of the people who made it than anyone I know.
Yeah, we travel extensively.
So I want to ask you, as an American who traveled to Italy, how do you talk about Italian wine now? Is it more confusing? Is it less confusing? Where the hell do you start with this beautiful, amazing chaos?
Yeah, this country is just complete chaos. And that's something that I'm learning more and more every single day, how chaotic it is. Right now I've got this crazy obsession with reading about the mafia. I'm studying the mafia like crazy. And this country it's just patchworks and layers and nothing makes sense. Roads don't go in the same, there's no grid system. The wines are the same way. Things are categorized in a certain way, but we're in a country where, unfortunately, corruption happens. And so even when you follow us,
United States is not like that at all, thankfully.
No, not at all. The more I study the mafia, the more I think of, gosh, actually, this sounds very, very similar to to a lot of what happens in the United States.
Like, this is like the Kennedys.
Mafia. This sounds like...
Yeah, exactly.
Wine is total chaos. There's no point in try to make complete sense of it. It's, to me, better just to get lost in it.
The other thing too, I think that's wild. And we talk about like the chaos of Italian wines is there's so many different kinds of grapes. It's not like, I don't mean to pigeonhole France, because France has thousands of grapes that they're unaware of. Somehow the marketing engine behind France, whether they meant to or not, makes it, okay, look, this is Pinot, this is Chardonnay, and you sort of have a grasp on it, but Italian wine got so damn confusing. So I guess one of the things that really interests me is your knowledge of these individual grapes and all this stuff, but that's wildly intimidating. So when you came to Italy, what was the first thing? Did you start with, all right, Barolo, or did you go, I want to dive into the pool of Catalanesca?
No, for those who don't know, we have something like 1,850 or so grapes that, the numbers are always different. Some say 1,300, some say as many as 3,000. So it's very hard to come up with an exact number, but 1,800 grapes, the typical American knows 10: Cabernet, Merlot, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir, Syrah, and then maybe a handful of others. People always think Chianti's a grape. No, Sangiovese. But it's the first thing people want to do is compare every single grape. They're like, well, which would you say that this is most like? If we're speaking about Catalanesca, they're like, is this like Chardonnay? I'm like, no, it's like Catalanesca. And I can't take 1,800 grapes and turn them all into 10. And there's no need to. And I don't know. Of course, people always want to be able to remember things for the future so that when they're in a restaurant, they remember, oh, okay, I liked Catalanesca. I can tell you, too, just because you like one Catalanesca in Italy doesn't mean you're going to like all of them, because every winemaker here, we have 150,000 winemakers, some, 1,800 grapes, a million different terroirs. Every single winery puts a different thumbprint on the wine. That's why some Chianti you'll love and some you'll hate, because that region is huge and you can't expect the wines to all taste the same, even though that was kind of the concept, not for them to all taste the same, but that was the concept of the DOC system, of course, was to give a general sense to, if you're going to call a wine Chianti, it should taste in general a certain way, Chianti Classico, whatever. But unfortunately, we're in Italy and that's just not the case. So to me, the beauty of Italian wine is just getting completely lost in it, to the point where it doesn't matter what the grape is. It matters what's behind the wine. It matters who made it. It matters what the issues are in that territory. Is that winemaker taking care of the land? Because the most important thing in Italy is the land, is the territory that they are in, because that is our gold here. It's not, we're a poor country. I love that I always say we. I feel part of us now. I feel a little bit more Italian.
You've lived there long enough.
7 years.
So now you talk about all of these different ways that you can be confused. And we haven't even thrown in food. Holy smokes. And we try, in the Pairings episode, we try to personify what you're talking about right now. I mean, we do a gigantic tasting at the beginning of the episode to throw everybody off. And a lot of the food that's served, I mean, I say this as a compliment. It's very simple. It's not like our first episode of Pairings where it's 3-star Michelin and there's all these components and they're from a specific radish from this kind of place in a prefecture of Japan. And that radish was made by this person who, only spoke one language and only came out of the ground 1 month of the year. It's not like that. So here it's like, what's the dish? Meatballs. But they're made perfectly,
Exactly.
it's cacio e pepe. There's 3 ingredients.
Yep.
You count pasta, pepper, and cheese. And that's it. But yet making that perfectly is the idea. And so when I think of it, I don't know that precision is known like from an Italian standpoint. Precision is not what comes to mind. I think about that with Austrians or Germans or the Swiss, but I don't think the Italians get enough credit for how precise their wines and food are. But it comes from simplicity. Am I wrong in this?
I would say that the food comes from, of course, from simplicity. The food, it doesn't come from the creation of, all the different ingredients and such. It comes from the raw material, like going down to the roots, going down to the soil. When that vegetable was grown in the proper soil, in the proper sun, in the proper condition, you don't need to adjust it to give it flavor. It has all the flavor you're looking for. You don't have to get creative. Same thing with the meat. The animals that are usually when we go see these animals, for some of our farmers that we work with Rimessa, they have 80 goats, or 100, sheep or whatever. They're all playing. They're the most happy sheep I've ever seen in my entire life. And when an animal lives like that, again, you don't need to modify these things. In fact, some of the worst restaurant experiences I have in Italy are the Michelin stars. I want to go to a trattoria that knows how to just maintain that simplicity and just use the best raw ingredients and the best raw materials possible. The wine maybe is a little bit more, it's simple, but it's super complex. I mean, and again, that just comes from having great soils, great terroir, great, here obviously artisans are working much more organically. And yes, we have big companies too. People, I think, have this perception that everything is small in Italy. No, we have the Antinori's and the Frescobaldi's and the Banfi's and the big guys too. But most of these, we just have a huge amount of artisans that are working in a very, very simple, ancient ways. They're going back to the basics, or not even going back. They just have always worked that way. So
yeah, well, it's pretty funny to see. You go to France and people are using horses, and it's kind of cute that they're using horses to plow their vineyards, and it's like part of their marketing. Then you go to some places in Italy, and they're like, "What is this thing you speak of, tractor?" Like they've literally never heard of it. They've just never even heard of they're like, combustion engine? I'm not sure I've heard of a combustion engine.
Nope.
It's a funny thing with when you really, and I'm not talking about, you take 34 minutes outside of Florence, go to the first winery that you can find. I mean, like you go way up in the hills, you go to Sicily, you go to these places where, the mayor is a goat and you have to go talk to the mayor and feed him a carrot. And they're very remote, and it's just, they really do. That word terroir gets thrown around so much, but they really do. They taste like the place, but it's not just like the chemical stuff. It's not just the dirt. It is literally, there is something about it could not have been made in this place for reasons other than the dirt, reasons other than the farmer's hands. It's like they planted that grape because they kind of had to for some reason 200 years ago. And then it became tradition. And then it became, but you can't synthesize that kind of stuff. It has to happen naturally.
Yeah, and over a long period of time. Like no one in general in Italy, when you think back of hundreds, if not thousands of years, was planting a grape for marketing purposes in general. They were planting a grape because they had it, because they had tried other ones that didn't work out, and this was the last one that made it. So, okay, let's kind of go with that one. And over a period of centuries, you end up with a natural selection of the right grape with the right terroir. Instead of saying, well, everyone likes Cabernet right now, let's plant Cabernet. It's easy to sell. And so you tend to have these wines that are wild, that are great without, nothing's forced about them. They're just, and then the other thing too is that they tend to match obviously the cuisine perfectly. So that's why, for the average person who doesn't know how to start with Italian wines, just go down to the simple basics. Whatever the local wine is with the local menu, they generally speaking will work together.
And if it doesn't, just drink more.
There you go. And who
And then it
cares?
will.
You learn. Yeah. And once you're drunk enough, it'll all taste good.
Yeah, which I do find in Italy, it happens. You have to be very careful because, I mean, geez, when we met you guys, we got on that train. We met you guys in Naples for dinner. I have seen a lot of dinners where a lot of wine gets thrown around, and you guys can drink with the best of them. I'm not going to lie. I'm very impressed, Lindsay.
Well, sharing is caring. We love opening. We love sharing. We love tasting.
You love having hangovers on the top of Mount Vesuvius at 6 a.m.
Come
It's
on,
great.
come on. These wines don't have
No.
sulfites. You shouldn't have the
Yeah, right. Like that's the reason.
No. There's a thing called alcohol in the wine.
I know. God, that's a whole other podcast. So what, as an American, and I dare I say as a woman going to Italy, did you find anybody who was like, well, this person doesn't know what they're talking about, or was this open arms and welcoming, or what was your experience moving there?
My gosh, if I have to be sincere, I was scared. Can I use the word shitless? I don't know if that's an okay word to use.
Yeah, say. How do you say scared shitless in Italian?
And I don't even know. I don't know how they would say it exactly. So yeah, I started working at Roscioli, which is a place that Anthony Bourdain had come to. I mean, this was a fairly famous place. There's the head sommelier of Roscioli, Maurizio Paparello, is one of the most important sommeliers in the world, for sure in Italy. And, here I am, this American who's been studying wine for a little while in the US, and I just come and start working beside Alessandro. And my gosh, you have no idea how many hours a day I would spend reading, because not only did I have to study the wine, I had to study the food too, because people would ask, Lariana bread, how does that made? How is buffalo mozzarella made? How is this made? And so the amount of things that I had to be able to know in a very short period of time was insane. I was scared to have, I didn't want to, I mean, also Rimessa Roscioli has an incredible, I think they had, at that point, we were completely 5 stars. We didn't even have like one star rating at all. And I was afraid that someone's going to come in and start, say, what is this American hosting a wine tasting? We're in Italy. And honestly, from just all the studying that I did and working along Alessandro for a period of time, it's amazing how much I learned in a short period of time, just from the amount of things I could taste. We started traveling for the wine club. And so when I started to speak from my experience from being on these vineyards myself, then and I could show pictures and videos of things that we were doing. Then I felt like I was Italian in some way. And people didn't see me so much as an American, as this person who was, deeply linked with the vineyards in Italy, who was traveling. I had stories to tell. And I took it more on a personal level, and I started speaking from experience instead of, worrying about, matching the ability of Alessandro and of Maurizio Paparello with their knowledge of Italian wines. I started from just from my experience, and that tended to work really, really well for people.
So I would recommend all American women just move to Italy. Totally welcoming, no problem. They'll totally embrace you.
Well, it depends on where. The South gets, obviously the south of Italy, you'll find definitely more stories of challenges for women, I think, than you may find in the North. Women are still...
Again, something that only happens in Italy. That's not an American problem at all. I'm sorry. I'm taking this in one direction.
No, I mean, our problems are the same. No, really. Italy's problems and America's problems, they're the same anymore. Globalization has made us all much more similar than we are different.
Yeah. And in some ways that's a danger to what we're talking about in Italy, is that everything's so provincial and everything is so small and in its place and corners, which brings me to, what are some of the greatest food and wine pairings you have had that you can name off the top of your head? And I mean, I know, and not like in the world, but in Italy, because I think watching, editing, shooting this episode, the pairings episode that you were in with this restaurant, I cannot explain to you how much I want to eat everything over and over again. And it never gets tiring. I want to eat it again. I want to eat it again. I want to eat it again. So you're bombarded by all this stuff. What are some of the best pairings?
The pairings, I mean, they're simple. The big thing I noticed about Italian wines is that they are just food wines. So you have these big food epiphanies with very basic dishes. It's not like it takes this huge craft or science to make things work. The wines tend to all have a little bit higher acidity, which generally makes them better for food. It cuts through the richness of the foods. It keeps your palate, kind of salivating, which, the saliva starts to break down the food on your palate, in your mouth, instead of waiting for it to get to your belly. And so they just work naturally really, really well together. Some of my favorites, my gosh, they're so simple, but like cacio e pepe schioppettino, which we speak about in the pairings video. The particular one that is, to me, the quintessence of a pairing is the Brissan schioppettino, because it has this extra dose of pepper and spiciness to it that happens to just perfectly synthesize with the cacio e pepe, because pepper is a challenging component in a dish to pair with. You need to have a kind of an equal amount of spiciness, and that's why the Cesanese also pairs really, really nicely with cacio e pepe, a local grape right from Lazio. Barolo Parmigiano, a simple classic. That Parmigiano, when it's in, you take the sip of the Barolo and your palate just, freaks out. It's dry. You're like craving for something to like get that cotton mouth off your palate. The alcohol in it is kind of burning in your throat. Your cheeks are salivating, and then you take a bite of Parmigiano and you go back to the wine, and suddenly it's like, you're falling back onto a mattress, onto like a feather bed. It just totally takes those tannins and brings them down, making them so soft.
Like I said, you need like a cigarette after these people talk about wine. It's great.
No, I mean, I love too. I love when I host the wine tastings that we do for the second wine, which sometimes we'll have the Insumma, the Catalanesca. We'll give them a bite of goat's cheese, and usually people take a bite of that. They take a sip of the wine, and okay, they like the wine, but they're a little something is a little bit too acidic, too whatever. I'm not used to this wine. And I say, okay, remember that feeling of that, your salivary glands puckering, take a bite of your goat's cheese, go back to the wine, and what happens? And I just watch everyone's like eyes just, bug out of their head like they're a deer in headlights, like, oh my gosh, food and wine pairings, they're actually a big thing. And so that's the fun part, is watching people realize that food and wine should be considered one topic. They're not two different things that you just see what happens when they work together. It's great. Even I remember we had this Primitivo Dolce Naturale with a double creamed blue cheese that was one of the most perfect wine pairings. Like, I just said, that is perfection. Like, they merged, like, I don't know, like I felt like I was floating in the clouds of heaven. I was like, it was the best thing ever. So anyways, I could list them off, but they're all really basic, simple things.
This is why it's such an interesting thing to watch our first episode with this 3-star Michelin restaurant it's very precise and it's very thought out. And then your episode being the second one where it's not that it's not precise and thought out. It's just that it comes from the ground up rather than the top down. And it's so interesting to compare and contrast those. But what I love, and I'm with you, Italian wine is, I think people act like they're intimidated by Italian wine. I don't think they're intimidated. I think they're just confused. It's like, how do you remember all these grapes? And at SOMM TV and with all the stuff we do, we try so hard to get people to try other stuff. Not just, I would drink Barolo every day for the rest of my life. Sure. That's fine. But there's still, to say, like you mentioned Cesanese, that is a grape that I had had it one time prior, but I really got into it when I was with you guys in Rome. We had several that were fantastic. And then I went to a restaurant, I ordered some more. I probably had 6 or 7 of them while I was with you guys. And it's like, who has 6 or 7 different Cesaneses? A grape that grows around Lazio, around Rome. I think it was nearly extinct at one point. If I read my stuff right, it's not the most sought after grape, and yet it's incredible. So what I want to talk to you about as we wind this down is what grapes that you think the normal person, quote unquote, whatever that means, has not heard of from Italy that they should try. Wines that you would be surprised by, and a lot of these are not very expensive. They're pretty affordable.
Completely. Bottles. The tough part is, of course, the export market. Depending on which state you're in the U.S., you have access to different things. So New York, of course, has much better accessibility than Kansas has and Oklahoma has to Italian wine. And unfortunately, the big ones that get exported are your Prosecco, your Chianti, your maybe Barolo, of course. And so these are the names. We love familiarity. It's a cognitive bias. That's why people continue to grow Cabernet, Merlot, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, because we buy what's familiar. If I ask my clients all the time, why do winemakers do this? Why would you guess? And they sit there kind of with a blank stare on their face. And I say, okay, you're in the supermarket and you see a bottle of Schioppettino and a bottle of Cabernet. Which one do you choose? And they say, yeah, I get it. You buy the Cabernet. And so we love to buy what's familiar. And it's scary because with a bottle of wine, sometimes they cost 30, 40, 50 euros. And you don't want to take a risk necessarily on this Cesanese grape if you don't even know how to pronounce it. Schioppettino, forget about it. Now you're saying, I don't even know how to pronounce this thing. I'm bringing this to a dinner party and I don't even know what to call or how to pronounce it properly. So of course you get naturally scared. But I can say that at least a couple of the grapes that you maybe could find that aren't your typical, at least they're not Chianti and they're not Chianti Classico and Prosecco would be Franciacorta, for example, is made from the grape Chardonnay often, sometimes Pinot Nero, Pinot Bianco. So that's not the name of a grape, of course, it's the name of a wine, but I have to be careful. I hope no one in your audience is French, but I'm going to say it's Italy's version of champagne, meaning that's made in the Metodo Classico.
I love.
Someone will put a comment of this.
Wine. I'm always promoting it. So I am always promoting this.
Try Franciacorta as a challenge to Prosecco. Verdicchio can be a grape that sometimes you will find in the export market that not necessarily everyone knows about. Vermentino, I'm not quite as wild about, but there are some producers that make a nice Vermentino. Even wines from Etna, those are usually you can find, which are going to be Nerello Mescalese, Nerello Cappuccio. But trying some Etna Rosso, Etna Bianco, to me, those are two fascinating regions. Keep in mind, you asked me, Jason, name some grapes. We call our wines, of course, by places. So that also confuses people. Yeah. That's the biggest confusing factor in our wines is that people don't know all these places. So, here I am saying what the grape is, but you're not going to look for Nerello Mescalese. You're going to look for Etna Rosso. So that's the challenge. But if you can find some of the more interesting wines, like Etna wines, for example, even Barbaresco as a different wine to Barolo, because they are different. They're very, very similar, but everyone knows Barolo. Not everyone drinks Barbaresco. Or try a Nebbiolo from Valtellina, for example. You can find those wines sometimes in
very, very acidic, very good. Those are real racy and wonderful. I love those wines.
Yeah. So try to just get away from Prosecco, Chianti Classico. Get away from those. When you see something, try it. Start, go to a local wine shop and have a conversation with someone. Because if you go to a supermarket, you're kind of screwed because those are the wines that are, of course, going to be available. But go to a local wine shop. Have a conversation, even if it has to be Costco. If you live in the middle of nowhere, of course, you don't have a great option for a wine shop necessarily. But go to Costco. They even have a sommelier, I think, present. And ask to try something different. Use whatever vocabulary you have to tell them what you like. I like a bigger wine. I like a lighter wine. I like one that's not, too sharp or too tannic. And ask them to make a suggestion because there is a huge world. And so to try to memorize and learn everything about Italian wine and then take your education and go make a selection is going to be nearly impossible.
Yeah, I think that there's always this element of where do I start in Italian wine? And I think the real answer is just start.
Just start.
You have to just go.
Absolutely.
Just start. And I mean, it's easy to go with Chianti and all that stuff. But I mean, I think what you said, that there are some really bad Chiantis and there are some really terrific Chiantis is true. And that Chianti itself is like a life lesson. You have to go through, all the different places where they're growing. Chianti's not a grape, as you said. So it's this whole conversation. Obviously, whenever we talk Italian wine, I always feel like it needs to be like a 47-part podcast series, and everyone would be snoozing by episode 2. So it's tough, and I applaud you and Alessandro and your restaurant, you guys, for keeping it so vibrant and interesting. And it's you guys are the people that keep me from getting jaded. In
Totally.
This world. So I thank you.
No, I really try to use, Alessandro, we kind of joke that he's the dark side of the force and I'm the sunny light side of the force. He tends to get very philosophical and very deep and very passionate and whatever. And I make sure that everything's still approachable. I've studied, I read a book every 3-4 days. I love reading about wine, about history, about culture, you name it. But I make sure everything's approachable. I use the stupid concept of if my mom doesn't care, who cares? Most of the people that come through our tasting room, our winery, our restaurant, they're your traditional tourists. They're not master sommeliers. So we're not there to give a master class. We're there to just make wine approachable, make it friendly, give them information that moves them, show them videos of where the wine came from, let them see who the winemaker was, tell them the issues of that territory, because our issues are different than yours in the United States. We have a bigger issue. People always ask about climate change. That's never a conversation that comes up in our conversations with our winemakers. Yes, they talk about it. It's not like people are for sure dealing with it and they're harvesting earlier and they're changing small techniques and little things that they're doing to adjust to it. But it's not our issue. Our issue is more about saving the land and protecting the land for future generations. It's combating the homogenization of wine, making everything, we don't want, people get so pissed off about super Tuscans. Some people said, wait a minute, we had Sangiovese here for 1,000+ years. Why do now we have to suddenly plant Cabernet to appease the tourists? And yeah, maybe they taste good. Sassicaia, I'm going to drink it, of course, if you put it in front of me. But we try to educate people of why super Tuscans are an issue in Italy, and not just that, oh, they're good and, if you give me a bottle of 85 Sassicaia, of course I'm going to drink it. But it's not just about the quality of the wine. It's about what's behind that. What's the issue? Because we have a lot of issues in Italy, a lot, and I'm learning about it more and more as the more I study the mafia. I mean, things go deep here. Things go really, really deep. And can I tell you too? We go into the periphery for a lot of these wineries. We're not in Florence, Venice, Rome. We are in the periphery. And Italy is a very, very poor country. And vineyards save this country. They really do. Because if they were to go away, mass whatever will come in, mafia will come in, and everything will just become a shopping mall. It'll become a place where they sell cheap crap and whatever. Vineyards save the territory and traditions and the history of a region. So that's what we talk about when we talk about wine.
It's really well said. I think if you were to go to every town in Italy and they had the same spaghetti pasta, they didn't have agnolotte and they didn't have the different raviolis and they didn't have all the different kinds of pasta. That's the way I would equate the wine. It seems like it's like, I'll have a red wine, but truly it's like there's 1,000 fingers that come off that sentence, and that's history and that's culture. And Lindsay, I appreciate that. It's very well said. Very well said. Yeah, I'm going to go join the mafia now. It sounds like that's the way to go.
Mafia is everywhere, sadly.
Mafia is everywhere. You can see Lindsay in an incredible drink a bottle where we opened up a bottle of wine on the edge of Mount Vesuvius, which I think 2 weeks later, like a tourist died or something or fell into the crater. I don't know if you remember this, but
no, I didn't.
We're one of the first people who ever filmed on the edge of the crater, and that's on SOMM TV. And this
it's
incredible
illegal.
Episode, and then
you have to get permission. Sure. Like you can't just walk up there. You actually have to have special permission to enter where we entered.
One of the very coolest things I've done in my career, and then of course
that was epic. Thank you for thank you to Alessandro too, because he was the one that obviously coordinated it.
It's wild. Well, it's great to have you on. I can't wait till the next time I can actually be in Rome and drink some wine with you, Linz. Thanks.
Ciao, Jay.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. I am packing my things up here now, and I am moving to Italy. I'm not sure about Rome or Milan or, I'm just anywhere in Italy is fine for me as far as it goes. I hope that all of you tune in to Pairings, which is airing on SOMM TV. And if you're listening to this on the day of release, in 2 days. But if you're listening a little later, tune to sommtv.com right now or go to your app and watch our new episodes of Pairings. Don't forget to subscribe to SOMM TV, $49.99 for an entire year, sommtv.com. Everybody be safe. Talk to you soon.